Okay, cool. So welcome everyone on this month's episode releasing at the speed of light. So who we are and what is CJUG? We are a community around the Java ecosystem. We are trying to learn and contribute to JVM technologies. And we are also trying to help in mentorship or finding career opportunities. So if you are hiring, please reach out to us. If you are seeking for a job, please see our jobs mailing list. And we also want to have fun and build things in the meantime. So if this is your first time here, please share the love and invite someone for our next event. And if you're interested in doing something for the Java community, please consider volunteering and or speaking at CJUG. And you can reach out on Meetup, Twitter, email, you choose. So we have a very brief code of conduct. Just please be nice to each other. And we have over 2,500 members now. But we also know that there are way more Java developers than this in this area. So if you know them, please let them know about us and invite them to join. I'm not 100% sure what is our next month event, but we will have a in-person Dev Nexus, it seems, in April. So take a look at their schedule. It should be nice. Logistics, this is an old slide. Hopefully you all know the Wi-Fi password and the location of your kitchen and bathroom. And we are sponsored by JFrog. They help keeping us running, for example, providing Zoom licenses. So thank you for them. And today's speaker, Andres, he's calling in from Switzerland. He's a Java Groovy developer and also a Java champion. And he participated in a lot of popular projects. I think he's most known because of Groovy, Griffon, and also JReleaser that he's going to talk about today. So I guess the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the introduction and welcome everyone. So yes, that is true. I'm currently streaming from Switzerland. There is a 9-hour difference. So I really appreciate that you folks have made some time during your lunchtime. We could have done it at your typical time, which will be 7 in the evening. That would have been 4 in the morning for me. Still possible. But I'm glad that now it's 9 in the evening for me, so it's doable. Please feel free to stop me at any time. If you have any questions, you may want to use a mic, or if you want to use the chat, it's also okay. Let me share the screen, and you should be seeing the browser. And now I'm gonna go into the slides. Here we go. So, the topic of today, JReleaser releasing at the speed of light. And the idea of this session is to showcase an open source project that I've been working on for almost the past year. And this particular tool can hook into your existing release process, or if you don't have one, then it can help you get started. Now, there's another tidbit that I would like to mention is that before we started the recording, Jonathan and I were talking. The last time that I had a chance to talk to CJUG was 3 years and 1 month to the date, January 15 of 2019. So today we're going to do it online. Hopefully there will be some other time in the future where we can see again face to face and have also other sorts of conversations. So this is me, I'm Andres, and I'm currently employed by Oracle, and I work at a database group, and we do a lot of things with open source. But the topic of today is not related to my employer. It's a complete open source project that has nothing to do with it. It's just like any other regular open source project. I also love the Groovy language. Yeah, I like dynamic languages, but I also love to use Java. So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction on how the tool came to be so that we can figure out what it can do for you. So like yourselves, I like to build applications, and I have a knack of building command line applications or also a small UIs. In the past, I used Swing. Nowadays, I use JavaFX. So when I'm done building the application, the next thing I want to do is publish it somewhere so that users may find it. Now, if I'm just putting my hand as a developer, I'm used to using the build tool of choice, Maven, Gradle, what have you, and then just build it and boom, I got my binary. But the users don't do that. Users expect the binaries to be much, much closer to the other kind of applications they can install from somewhere other places. Say, if you're on a Mac like me, and you probably would like to install binaries or applications using Homebrew. If you're on Windows, maybe it's Winget, Chocolate, Scoop. If you're on Linux, it's a Snapcraft or Flatpak or something else, right? So, of course, from a Java point of view, from a perspective of a Java developer, you can repackage a Java application or a Java distribution such that these platform packagers may be used. But you have to research on each one of those platform packages. Now, users will also like to find your application displayed or your package displayed in some sort of, so the package manager can give you a list of applications that can be installed. You can have release notes, you can have change, you can have many things that can be harvested from your project sources. We just have to figure out a way to put those things. So that was me trying to get a particular JavaFX application out the door like a couple of years ago. And I didn't have an answer to all these questions that I just raised. So I put a pause on it. I started doing some other things. As an inspiration, I look at two other projects. One of them is JReleaser and the other is JBank. Yes, even though I like Java, I also write code in Go. And I also wrote a very small CLI application in Go that lets you bootstrap or launch a Maven build or a Gradle build using the wrapper or the actual command. So once I did this, I stumbled on the same problem. Do I have users locate the sources of my project and build the binaries and install it? Or do I find a way to provide platform packages for this CLI? Turns out JReleaser does that for me and more. Calculates checksums. It can also generate signatures with PGP or cosign. It has many other things that it can do. So when I saw that, I said to myself, I want JReleaser but for Java. Unfortunately, JReleaser only works for Go code. So if you are like me and you're writing Go code, then definitely have a look at JReleaser. You won't be disappointed. Now, JBank is a Java tool. It's a CLI that lets you launch Java scripts. So these are Java sources. This is not JS. These are just JavaScript. So you know that the JDK 11 added an option to launch from source, single source file that you can just run with a Java interpreter without having to compile it before. JBank adds on top of that behavior and also adds dependencies in the same script. So you can have a self-contained Java script and a few other bells and whistles that makes JBank the best Java command that you can use. The author, Max Anderson, figured out a way to publish JBank to many different places. But he did it explicitly for JBank using Gradle scripts and bash scripts and so many things. So one day, Max and I went talking about what he had to do in order to make all these things work for JBank. And I said to him, well, in the case of Go, I only had to write a single YAML file. Yes, I know YAML, but it's just one configuration file. And I got everything else that you just did. So it dawned on us, what if there were a tool like JReleaser, but for Java? What if that tool were to learn from all the lessons that JBank had to go, so that new projects or existing projects can just leverage all that? And that's how a JReleaser was born. So what it is, basically, you continue to use the same build tool that you use today, be it Apache Ant. Yes, even in this time and date in 2022, there are still people using Apache Ant. Or it could be Maven, it could be Gradle, or anything else. You continue to build the binaries and the projects in the same way. And then you add one additional configuration file that you supply to JReleaser. And JReleaser can do the following things for you. You can create a Git release on popular Git services like GitHub and GitLab, including the open source versions and the enterprise versions. Also Git. If you have any binaries, this is not a must, but if you do, then you can create packages such as Homebrew or Scoop, Chocolati, JBank, Snapcraft, and a few others. You can also create Docker images if you want to. And finally, it can also announce when a new release is posted. It can announce it to many distribution channels. It could be Twitter, SDK Man, Zulip, Discord, Teams, so many different options. So how does it do it? JReleaser takes in one configuration file in YAML format and one command, which is JReleaser, and does everything for you in one, let's say, one chunk. Whereas JReleaser, well, it could do that if you use the orange command, the one at the top, full release. But early on in the development of the tool, we figured out that what if we are able to break down the different steps so that you can invoke them separately from one another? So that, for example, if you only care about generating a changelog and you want to create the Git release in other means, then just invoke the changelog step. Or if you only care about creating package managers and the Git release will continue to be created in other ways, then just use the column in the middle, publish, package, and prepare. Or if you want everything, just invoke full release. Now, JReleaser expects your binaries to exist before you invoke the release. And these binaries are created using your build tool. But JReleaser can optionally also assemble some of these binaries. For example, if you're using JLink to generate a custom Java runtime, then JReleaser can do that for you. And it's done in such a way that you can generate cross-platform Java runtimes in the same node. That means that if you're on Windows and you want to generate a Java runtime for Linux or Mac, you can do it. There is no need to use different nodes. You can also assemble platform installers using JPackage. Unfortunately, in this case, you do have to run it on each node. So one for Mac, another for Windows, another for Linux. And the same goes for Graal VM native image. There is no cross compilation yet. We don't know if it's going to happen. So for now, you must run on each node, and JReleaser can also assemble those native executables for you. So in terms of integration, I've mentioned a few, but here's a full list that we have at the moment. You can have full release support on GitHub, GitLab, open source and enterprise versions, Gitya. Codeberg is another service out there, free service that is based on Gitya. Or if you are using some other Git service, in this case, it could be Amazon Code Commit, or is Azure DevOps or Bitbucket, you can tag the release, but we don't have yet API integration with those specific services. If you want to upload binaries to other places besides or alternately to the release page as release assets, then you can post it to JFrog Artifactory or to an HTTPS server of your choice. It only needs to support a put or a post request. Or you can also upload it to an Amazon S3 bucket or any other cloud provider that has an Amazon S3 compatibility API. If you want to generate package managers, then there's Homebrew that works for Mac and Linux, Chocolati for Windows. You can create Docker images. Goldfish works for the 3 major platforms. JBank has another way of consuming applications using jars. It's called catalogs. MacBooks works for Windows, for Mac. Scoop is like Homebrew, but for Windows. SDK Man, my personal favorite, works on all platforms. Snapcraft works on Linux, and Spec is just another way for building RPMs, typically using the Fedora Copper build service. And if you want to announce a release, we already mentioned Twitter before, but you can also use Gitter or Mastodon, Mattermost, Slack, so many of the options. If the service that you like to use is not listed here, but it does support incoming webhooks, then you can use the webhooks integration that we provide. But if it's not possible, then just get in touch with us and we'll figure out a way to integrate that particular service. So the inputs, these are the things that you build. We have a few options. So the binaries that you provide to JReleaser have to be packaged as a zip or as a tar file. Now, these distributions follow a particular structure. There is a bin directory that contains the executable or the launcher. There may be a lib directory that contains the jars. There may be a config or any other directory for supporting files that make the application run, the license, or README, what have you. Maven and Gradle have plugins that can build these kind of distributions with the right format, so that's easy to configure. Another popular choice for deploying Java applications are Uber jars or fat jars that are executable and contain all dependencies. Of course, we support this kind of distribution. For obvious reasons, because JReleaser can assemble this, we support JLink distributions and Ground native image distributions. Native packages are typically created using JPackage. These are DMG or Package for Mac, MSI or XC installers for Windows, or deb or RPM files on Linux. You may create them using Maven, Gradle, or any other means, or JPackage is the same to JReleaser. One important bit is that the first kind of binary that you provide, I mean, it's assumed that you're working in Java. But what if you do not? What if you're using some other language that is not Java? Say Rust, which is growing in popularity. Turns out that any kind of binary file can be distributed using JReleaser. There's, a matter of fact, already a couple of projects that have shown how you can use Rust with Cargo and cross-compile to generate as many binaries as needed, package them with JReleaser, and then just go into the next step to do the release. So JReleaser goes beyond Java. You can work with any kind of project. If you're using Go, I would still recommend you to continue using JReleaser. But if you're using something else, then give a try to JReleaser. So how do you launch this thing? Well, there are a few choices depending on your platform. If you're on a Mac, then you can use many of the different installers that are available. So SDKman is probably the easiest one, at least for me, or JBank, which will download a Java runtime for you. GoFish brings in a standalone version, so you don't have to have Java installed, just do it for you. Homebrew will also bring in its own Java version, and MacPorts, I have to think, I'm not sure if you need a previous version of Java, but if any of these options are not and good enough for you for whatever reason, you can go into the release page for a particular version and then load two particular versions. The first one is just a production code, and you need a Java runtime, Java 8 as a minimum. Or the standalone version includes a cross-platform Java runtime packaged with JLink. So just unzip and run. You don't need Java pre-installed on your system. For Linux, we have pretty much the same options, plus the one available for Fedora Copper. And there are two variants of the standalone version. The first one that simply says Linux as classifier. This works on Ubuntu or any other glibc-based distribution. And the other one is for distributions compiled with Muscle, so typically Linux Alpine. For Windows, there is a different option for installing. In this case, the scope. There is no Homebrew. And you also have the choice of downloading the zip file or a standalone zip file that brings in the particular Java runtime. Alternatively, you can also use Docker images. We have two versions. The first one is built with Ubuntu, and the second one is built on Linux Alpine. For right now, you may be thinking, okay, based on all these different options, how JReleaser can be used. And you may be wondering, yeah, JReleaser is kind of like a CLI tool. Does JReleaser use itself to create its own releases? And the answer will be yes, it does, since the first release that we posted. Matter of fact, we have a rolling early access release scheme, so that every time that we push a commit to the main branch, then a new release is posted, a new early access or a new snapshot. It's pretty slick. You may also use a single Java source file with Java 11 or plus to download JReleaser. This downloads the Uber jar from JReleaser and just run it as a regular executable jar. And so far, I'm just talking about how you can use the CLI tool. But you can also use it as a Maven plugin, or as a Gradle plugin, or as a set of end tests. So we covered a wide spectrum of options for using the tool, depending on how you like to build your projects. If you want to use the tool in a CI/CD pipeline, then we have guides that cover all these different options. We have a specific or explicit GitHub action that simplifies things when you're running on the CLI. And the Docker images that I showed earlier are also aware of the specifics of running inside GitLab CI. So you don't have to build yet another Docker image in order to run JReleaser inside your GitLab CI pipeline. Okay, enough of this. Let's look at the demo. We're going to start small, and then we're going to add a few more features as we go. So what I have here, well, before I go there, are there any questions so far? Nothing on the chat. Here we go. So here we have a simple project. It's a Maven project. Happens to be a CLI that prints out hello world when you invoke it. And it's just that. And if you look at the commits, it's a handful of commits, like 11 commits or so. And I have decided to follow a particular naming convention, but it's not specific to JReleaser, it's specific to this project. But if we follow any naming convention, then you may be able to use that into your advantage when we generate the changelog. So I have cloned this project already. Notice that there are no releases or there are no tags. I have cloned this project locally. You can see it here, same sources.
Yes.
So yeah.
We had a question about, like, does it support for deploying in AWS?
In the case of deploying, we can upload binaries to an Amazon S3 bucket. Yes, in that regard, it can do so. So this project, what we're going to do is create a Git release before we build any binary. So this could be like a Maven library, or it could be a JavaScript thing, or it could be any kind of project. I do have I use SDKman to keep my JReleaser versions up to date. You can see all the different versions that I have installed. This is the latest release posted last Sunday. We're very close to getting 1.0 final. It should happen within the next 2 months. And we can verify that that is the correct version that I'm using, JReleaser-B, and that gives me 100 milestone 2. Perfect. So notice what I'm going to do next. JReleaser help tells me all the different commands that I can have access to. And the names of the command match the diagram that we saw earlier before, the workflow with all the different steps. So I'm going to call release now. Let's do JReleaser release and do the help. And it tells me a lot of options that I can invoke, such as, well, there they are. There's a bunch of things. The important bit will be if I want to use a different config file than the default, or if I want to run on dry run mode so that I don't affect any remotes, and every operation will be local. That's perfect. Different login levels. But then the thing that I'm going to use here is this autoconfig option. So the first thing I'm going to tell JReleaser is that my project is hosted on Git. You should have a remote. So you should have an owner and a name, and all this data I can use to my advantage. So I'm going to say JReleaser release autoconfig, and I need to tell it which version I want to release. So I can pass that as a parameter. I can also set it as an environmental variable, but in this case, I'm going to make it explicit. So once I do this, this will invoke that particular version of JReleaser, do something with my project, generate the changelog. There are no input files, so there's no checksums, no signing, no uploading. This will be the step to upload to Amazon S3. Right now, there's nothing to upload. And it uploaded to this particular repository. Actually, I did it on GitLab. Okay, let's go into GitHub. I was in the wrong demo, but I can do the same thing. Here we go. Same demo, same command. Nice, uploaded to GitHub. Perfect. We can have a look at this file, the changelog. It's very simple. It's just a list of all the commits. And if I go here and do a refresh, now there's a release. And because I just did it on GitLab as well, by mistake, if I do a refresh here on the same code base hosted on GitLab, now there's one tag, click there, and there's going to be a release that looks like that. That's the changelog that we saw earlier before. On GitHub, when I click on the release, there's the changelog as well. Okay, so far so good. We can do things better. We can format the changelog and we can add files. We can add binaries. So let's build this project. Let's invoke Maven. And the way that this project is configured, it will generate two binaries, a targc file and a zip file. So what I can do now is do JReleaser release the project, the thing that we had before. Yes. And we're going to say changelog formatted to make the changelog look a little bit better. And say file will be in target distributions app zip file, and another file that will be inside target distributions app targc. And this is going to fail. Why is it going to fail? Even though it calculated the checksums and there are no signing, it tells me hold on a second. The GitHub release for that particular tag has already been created. So unless you tell me to override it, I will do so, or I can also update a release. So I can change the title, the body, and append new assets. But if you don't say anything like that, the JReleaser says, hold on a second, no, I'm not going to let you destroy a release. So we have to be explicit. It says either you said override or you said update. Let's do that. So same command. Now we say override. Let's do that. Notice that checksums were not calculated again because the inputs were already the same. So there's no need to do that. Same thing will happen with signing in case that we had it uploaded. Notice that there are now 3 assets that are being uploaded to that particular release. Let's go to GitHub and do a refresh. Notice that the change process look a little bit different. So now there are lists items. Now I have the default committers, and I have the 2 binaries. Great. We can keep adding files. We can add information for signing, but if we start to do that in just a command line, it's going to be just a big command line. And that's when we start to make use of the model. That would be better. So instead of using this, let's look at the model file that we already have here. So we have some metadata about your project, the name, URL, some description, authors, license. All this information will be very handy when we create package managers such as Homebrew and the others, because that information is used. So notice that this one has a typo. We'll see that again when we publish to Homebrew. We make it explicit that we want to release to GitHub. We want to sign commits and tags, so that's good. We're also going to link to an announcement when we post a release. And the rest of the configuration that is here is how we can format the changelog. Now, this is very explicit. You can have your own conventions, and there are other conventions such as conventional commits or Gitmoji that instead of using all these lines to figure out how we can categorize commit messages, just apply one line and it does everything for you. We're going to sign artifacts using PGP. And so where is the passphrase? Where is the secret key? Where is the public key? All these things are secrets. Those secrets are kept in a particular file, which I'll show you in just a moment, the location, but not going to show the contents because that contains my secrets and my tokens. I'm also going to publish a Homebrew formula. And here we have the 2 binaries, the zip file and tar file. You notice this? That is kind of like a placeholder. You have seen mustache templates in the front end before. This is exactly the same. So you can think of these as variables within your configuration file. So now I'm going to invoke JReleaser, the full release command, because I also want to build that Homebrew formula. So here we go. And it tells me we have a problem. Why? Because the project version was not set. It's easy to fix. It says, remember what was the project version that we're setting? We're setting the command line, because now we use the model. We have to set it in either explicitly on the command on the model, or we can set it as an environmental variable. So let's say export version, it will be equal to 100, and let's do the full release. And now you see things are getting better. So calculates the checksums, signs the artifacts, uploads all the artifacts plus the signatures, generates a Homebrew formula in this particular repository, which is created for you if it's not already there. And when we go to the changelog, here we go. So now this is because we use categories and we're matching all the commits, so that starts to look a little bit better. And here we have all the assets, including the signatures. So that's pretty good. What about that formula? The formula was posted to this repository, and we can tell that it's fresh because posted 41 seconds ago. And here's a formula. Points to that URL that we just posted as an asset. This is based on a template, and you can change the template if you need to add or tweak something else. So this is the basic thing that it does once you have the model. The model may be defined using YAML or TOML or JSON, or the Maven DSL when you're using as a plugin, or the Kotlin DSL or the Groovy DSL when you're using as a Gradle plugin. This file here is the one that contains my secrets. There are 4 different formats: properties, TOML, JSON, or YAML. So whichever format you prefer, you can use it. And that's how it does for GitHub. But if I do the same thing for GitLab, I just need to build the project. So I get those binaries. And as I showed you the model, it looks very similar to what we had before, except that now says I'm going to read it to GitLab, and there is no discussions, because the discussions are a GitHub specific feature. The rest of the information looks exactly the same. So I can say JReleaser full release, and this should create a release with the changelog, similar to what we saw on GitHub. And we'll also create a Homebrew formula. So we see that the checksums, the signing, it's uploading all the different assets. And in just a moment, it will create a formula. Okay, so when it's done, I can go here and do a refresh on GitLab, get all the assets, and get the changelog very similar to what we saw earlier. And if I change to Homebrew tab, this repository gets created automatically for me, and we get a formula that was just updated, and it looks very similar to what we saw on GitHub. Finally, Codeberg works very similarly, and we are going to make one more change. Let's build it. So we get the binaries, and then we look into the model. The model has the difference here that says we're going to release to Codeberg, but I'm also going to announce, and I'm going to announce to my Discord channel because it's easy for me to set it up. Where is it going? Discord uses incoming webhooks. If anyone has access to that URL, it will be able to post information without it as is. So I'm treating that webhook, that URL, as a secret. So it's going to go into that config TOML file that I hinted to earlier. We can tell what information JReleaser knows about my project by just invoking the config command. And we can see that even though for Homebrew that we just defined it that we want to activate it, there's a lot of information that JReleaser knows about how to publish to Homebrew. And here is the information for announcing for Discord. This tells me there's some sort of set of token that is available. If it was not set, then it will tell me. And of course, the operation will fail. And there is the default text that is going to be sent, again, using those mustache templates. And there's definitely much more information that JReleaser knows about your project. So let's now do a JReleaser full release. And this will create a release, you upload the assets, create a formula, and announce to Discord. Now we see that this is new. So when you go to Discord here, to cover. Now we get a release. We click on that one. Looks the same as on GitHub. And let's navigate to the Homebrew tab. And we have, once again, a formula that can be installed using Homebrew. What about that Discord channel? Let's log into Discord. Let's open it up. Click there and just a moment. Yeah, go away that. Click here. And we have here today at this time, this is my time in Switzerland. And that's the release that I just posted. We click there and it goes back to that release. It will work the same for GitHub and the others. And they will work very similar to the already announced channels that you may configure. There is more stuff that you can configure if you wanted to. And of course, you can explore all the different features. The tool is hosted at JReleaser.org. Just click on Getting Started and you see the basics, how you can install it, how you can get it started. Let's say if you want to use Apache Maven, then there's a very trivial Maven POM and the settings that you have to do that. Somewhere here is a release plugin. Here we go. But just these very basic things, this is actually how you will have to configure it to do the same thing that I just did with the app application. Or maybe you like to use Gradle. So this is how you configure it. Or again, if you use a command line, then you can start with YAML, JSON, or TOML. The different types of distributions that we discussed before. And if you want to configure something in particular, say, for example, you want to know how to configure Twitter. Yeah, let's look here, announce, and click on Twitter. And there you go. These are all the different settings that you can put in your configuration file, for which we have the 5 different formats. It's very easy to navigate to one another. Every single bit of configuration that is available in the site is available in the 5 different formats. If you want to know how, here are the guides for all the different continuous integration settings. Say if you want to know how to invoke full release with Gradle, just click here. And the names that you find here are very similar to, again, what we saw in the workflow. And in the Maven plugin, you will see the same thing. There's full release, all the different options. Or the command line, here we go, full release, all the same options. Or even the end tasks, there we go, full release, all the options that you can use. Examples, how you can use a tool. For example, here's the release file for JReleaser in all its glory. So it's quite big, like 200 lines of code, because it does a lot of things. The input files for JReleaser are 4 binaries: a zip file, a tar file for the distribution, the end tasks, and the Uber jar. Everything else, every other binary created by JReleaser is done by assembly or by this file. So all these settings, eventually what they do is generate a bunch of zip files and signatures and upload to a different set of repositories depending on your platform packages. So if I were to look here in JReleaser, the latest release, this one, and you look at all the different assets, this is a release posted using JReleaser, using just 4 source files and inputs, and it generates a lot of things that allows you to have a much wider reach to your different consumers. More stuff that you can have a look at here. It's plenty of information that you can search for. Yeah, you can even say, hey, how do you configure Twitter? Start writing Twitter. Let's go there. Boom. It goes back to that particular page that we saw earlier. Any questions so far? So there's a question on how does AWS or Docker will pick up the binary. So if we look here into packages, there's Docker. And what Docker will do is that you supply as an input that zip file or a tar file. And it may be that artifact that is local to you, or maybe you want to use a remote distribution, something that you already have published to GitHub or to Amazon S3. And the Docker file will be able to figure out how to do the things. You can configure to which Docker registry you want to publish. By default will be Docker Hub. but you can configure any registry that you want to. And in the case of Amazon, we click in upload, and let's see, Amazon S3. And the only thing that you need to configure will be the region, the name of the bucket, which will pick one by default for you, and the path that you want to use. This is the default path that is given, but you can use any other templating that you want to. You can even change the download URL. Or if you're using something that is not Amazon S3, but it's another cloud provider, then you supply a value for the endpoint. And that will be it. There is a project out there, Gluon's Scene Builder, which uses the Maven DSL. And it has configured uploading to Amazon S3. So let's see, somewhere here is the uploader. Here we go. This is the whole block. Using just the default configuration, you want to be sure that it's active. We don't want to upload any checksums or signature, just the binaries. And that is the default path. Where is the region? Where is the bucket? Those things are being set as part of the secrets. If you want to, you can set as secrets or environmental variables, or you can be explicit and set it here. Which things are going to be uploaded? All the distributions that we define here. For example, here's one native package, because use J package to distribute these JavaFX applications. And there is a bunch of different files that we want to upload. And we are overriding the particular path. Why? Because DMGs go into install Mac, and MSI going to install Win, and RPMs going to install Linux. This is how this project wants to do it. If you want to follow other conventions, then you may set the additional properties or just use your defaults. There are many other projects that make use of JReleaser. And I'm happy to say that JBank now uses JReleaser to create its releases. SDK Man also uses JReleaser. With the Quarko CLI also uses a JReleaser. We go here, who is using it? Here we have a few projects that are listed, but there are more coming up as time progresses. Okay, we're back to the slides. So what is coming up in the future? What is in the store for JReleaser? Well, of course, we are getting ready to release 1.0.0 in the coming months, hopefully sometime late March or early April. After that, there are still other features that are being considered. For example, having proper integration with Bitbucket and Azure DevOps, so you can have a full release, not just tagging. Additional packages such as Winget or App Image, Flatpak, or Arch Linux, the community edition, or the community packages, which is the our server. And there may be other kind of packages which may be considered in the future. I mentioned that you can use JReleaser with Rust, and right now the way that you configure Rust is not as straightforward because we have to map the platform that Rust uses from what Java uses. Let me show you a quick example of that. Here's an example project using Rust with cross compilation. And the difference here is this block. This is the one that we have to make explicit. This is the platform that Java understands, and this is the platform that Rust would like to use. So we just do the mappings. In the future, perhaps this whole block could be omitted and simply say something like, hey, I just want to use Rust. And then all the available mappings become ready for your project. And even though this is Rust, notice that the configuration of the project is very similar to what we saw earlier. Here's another assembler, one that creates zip files. And here's a bunch of artifacts that will be assembled by JReleaser. The next bit is to tell GitHub to use different nodes to build for Linux, Mac, and Windows, collect all those, and then just do a simple release, which is done in this way using the release action. First step, does the cross compilation and builds Rust binaries, assembles the zip files, uploads all the zip files, so it collects all of them. And finally, here is the release. Download the artifacts, invoke the release action, you're done. You only need to set the secret GitHub token so that it can create the release for you. And because we have all the configuration in the YAML file, it will do exactly what you tell it to do. So that's it. That's pretty much everything that I can show you about the tool. And we have some links, the website for the project that you already saw, JReleaser.org. All the sources are hosted on GitHub, JReleaser. There are a few other projects that are related to JReleaser, like the release action. If you happen to use the tool and find it useful for your work, then consider sponsoring the project. We have an open collective. And of course, we have a Twitter account where we post announcements or links to projects that are using JReleaser or interesting tidbits about JReleaser. Everything that we have seen so far is open source. You have not contributed to open source before. Let me tell you, it's very, very simple. You find a problem, what we saw today, or any other dependency or project or tool that is open that you use on your daily work, file a ticket. That's it. If you have the time and the passion, supply a test case or even supply source code, but you don't have to. Just opening a ticket is good enough, and that's plenty of help for us that are working on open source. If you find something that is not working properly on JReleaser, feel free to open a ticket. We also have a discussions page when we just brainstorm on features and ideas that may be added in the future. Or if you have a problem that is not necessarily an issue, just get in touch with us. With that, so thank you very much for your time. I could certainly keep talking and talking and talking about this. It's kind of a passion for me. But again, once again, you guys, thank you very much for your time during your lunchtime. And so I don't know if, are there any other questions that you'd like to ask? You guys are a bit shy, but that's okay.
I can start. I do have one. Can you publish publications into Maven Central with JReleaser?
Thank you very much. That is the often asked question. And for the time being, I would say no. What's going on here? Isn't JReleaser a release tool? Yes. Isn't posting pumps and jars to Maven Central part of the release? Yes. Why isn't JReleaser doing it? Because Maven and Gradle know how to do that already, and they do a pretty good job at it. So if you're using JReleaser as a Maven plugin or as a Gradle plugin, it's kind of like redundant to make JReleaser do that for you. But if you're using JReleaser as a CLI tool, regardless of if you use Maven or Gradle to build the stuff, then it starts to look like it may be a good idea for JReleaser to do so. For this reason, we have not yet provided this feature because there are alternatives that work pretty well. But in the future, after 1.0, we may be looking at a way to also publish jars and pumps to Maven Central or any other Maven compatible repository. So we already have Artifactory, which by the way also works with Sonatype Nexus. There is no need to do an explicit Sonatype Nexus integration. You can use the Artifactory setup that we have. But that only works for binaries, for zip files or tar files. If you want to upload pumps and jars, then you might get into a bit of trouble. So in the future, we may be able to support that, but not today, not right now.
Do you have a undo or unrelease function? Or is that a separate paid product called JRelease?
No, we don't have an unrelease. It depends on your release process. You might be able to do an unrelease. Say, for example, if you only do a Git release, then you can simply drop the release. But if you also publish to package managers, say Chocolatey, then manually you will have to go into the Chocolatey URL, in this case the default community maybe, and drop down that particular package. if you announce also as part of your release, then you kind of already put it out in the open that that particular version is out, but you want to just take it back. It may be a bit awkward. So there is no real rollback or on-release feature yet. It depends on your use case. We might be able to do some of that in the future. So you can always drop a release and recreate it. That's exactly what override does, but not like just drop and never do it. You could potentially, well, not potentially, you can create a Git release as a pre-release or as a draft and manually do the final push to the release. You can configure your GitLab CI pipeline or any other pipeline or GitHub actions to do the release in steps in case that you may encounter some problem in between to avoid these kind of rollback options.
Okay, that makes
so
sense.
Far,
thank you.
And so far, every option that we discuss is free. There are no paid options for JReleaser. There is no JReleaser Pro yet. All right. There are no more questions in the chat that I can see now. So, any other questions that you may have, or are we just calling it for today?
I have a quick one, which is slightly connected. I like the demo in the demo with GAM. The CLI tool you use to build GM. Mm-hmm. Could you please just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so let's do it here. So you see here that I have the Maven wrapper. This is a Maven project. So GAM, which by the way, you can tell this is the latest version. GAM allows me to run a Maven command or a Gradle command. Actually, you can run and or mavend bash, and what else? And even jbang. The idea behind GAM is that if I have a wrapper set up on my project, then it's going to use it. If I don't have the wrapper, it will try to locate a suitable build tool that can run my project. So right now you can see that I do have that wrapper there. So when I say clean, notice that it tells me it's going to use the wrapper that is found in that location, and it's going to run that particular POM file. Great. I'm going to move into source main Java, all the way where my sources are. And the next thing I'm going to do is do GAM build. Now, does Maven understand what the build command is? It does not. But Gradle does. And if you're like me, I keep switching between Maven and Gradle all the time. So I will make a mistake eventually. I will say Maven build, and that will be bad. And if I say Gradle install or clean install or Gradle verify, that'll also be bad because it doesn't understand it. So what GAM will do, it has a mapping feature. So that if I type a command that happens to have a mapping, it will do the right thing for me. In this case, build gets mapped to Maven verify. And remember that I'm inside a particular directory. I'm not at the root. So here we go. It builds because GAM tells me it's going to use a wrapper at that location and is going to run that particular POM file. So it's able to find the root of your project. Now let's go back and delete the wrapper. And if I invoke build again, notice that now GAM tells me I didn't find the wrapper, and I'm going to use this particular version of Maven. And if I want to be cheeky, I can, that's a configuration that is currently available. I think that's GAM help. these are the different commands that I can invoke. Let's try to force a Gradle build, even though we know this is Maven. So that will be gone, and let's invoke Gradle here. Let's see what happens. It doesn't work. There is no settings file. There is no build file here for Gradle. So of course, it can't do anything. But if I were to switch to a project that has both Maven and Gradle, I will actually have to figure out, well, do I want to run one? Do I want to run the other? Do I use these command flags like GM, GG, or GM for Maven, or JBank, or BAG, or AND, or the others? So this is the tool, and it's available as a series of command executables that you can invoke, and it's all built using JReleaser.
Cool. Thank you very much for the GUM and for the JReleaser demos as well. It was pretty cool. Is there anyone who has any questions?
No questions, but thanks again for presenting there, Andres, and thanks, Joni, for setting up the talk. GUM looks pretty cool, actually. I'm gonna actually get the word out there internally within the company.
Yeah, thank you. I use it every single day. I no longer type Gradle nor Maven, just GUM. It's one of those little utilities for which there are other options before. You might be aware of something called GDub or GWS, I think, which was implemented in Go very early on. This was my way to learn the Go programming language and also discover things like JReleaser. It's quite a nifty utility, a small one, highly configurable as well.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, you folks, for your time. Really, really happy to be able to connect with you again, and hopefully we can do it again in the future, face to face. I just have to find a way to travel from Switzerland to all the way to sunny Seattle.
Deal. Okay, thanks everyone for coming, and have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Great day, everyone.